So, Tomas, it's nice to have you back on the show. How are you today?
I'm very good, and it's great to see you and to be back.
I know, it's been a little while. And you have something quite interesting in your background. Do you want to tell people what it is?
I know
Shameless
it's
plug.
it's an original Natalie Nahai. I am a collector. This is one of probably my favorite piece of that artist. And if anybody wants to get in touch, it's reselling at a much higher price than I purchased it, but it's worth it because it will only go up, Natalie, as you
In
know.
value. Well,
Yes,
you know what they
exactly.
say. Yes. And especially in the age of automation, craftsmanship is
It's done by
a
a
thing to be
human.
prized.
Are you not getting into AI art yet?
That we have an upcoming conversation with a friend of mine who is a
Okay.
developer and a fine artist. He runs the Realist Painter, and he has a lot to say about
Yeah,
AI in the world of creativity and art. But for
yeah.
now,
Yes.
let me win the question back to you. And so I want to start where we always start, which is if we can use the frame of a global human psyche, and I know that you travel a lot,
Yeah.
what would you sense or suggest or imagine is going on at this moment in time in that kind of entangled web, that human psyche?
Yeah. I guess confusion, fear, excitement, and it would be like, that psyche would need to go to therapy, I guess, at the moment.
Just mass therapy.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, it's very difficult to truly adopt an average take on things,
Mm.
not least because, okay, so rational me is now thinking majority of people live in rural China and India. They're probably not worried about AI automation
Mm.
or the conflict in the Middle East or Russia, Ukraine or Trump's tariff, which are the things you and I probably think about more. So it will be ethnocentric to assume that that's the case.
Mm.
But if we narrow it down to the I would say, if not globalized, at least interconnected um, mass of people, I would say those are the things that are increasing our existential fear. And I think things we maybe took for granted are now a little bit more questionable, not
Mm.
least what it means to be human in an age where almost everything we thought is unique to us can now be outsourced to machines. So yeah, but that's
Yeah.
my own kind of, I spent more time thinking about this than most humans.
Well, I think our human exceptionalism is getting a bit of a kicking right now.
Yeah,
So you are in the throes of developing, writing, thinking
yeah,
through a new book.
yeah.
I would love to ask you what spurred you to write it? What's the principal theme and why is it so relevant now? Because it really is.
Yeah. So the book is coming out in October and it's called Don't Be Yourself, Why Authenticity is Overrated and What to Do Instead. It was going to be Why Authenticity is BS and What to Do Instead, but it got sanitized, so it's
Ah,
overrated. And
gotta love the
actually,
publishers.
uh, I came to the conclusion that when I write a book is because some topics or themes have been nagging me for some time.
Yeah.
And usually the topics that nag me are, are there or are those topics because there's like a massive gap between the mainstream belief or thinking about a concept or an idea and
Yeah.
what we know to be true in terms of the evidence. So, I think in a way, uh, authenticity, which may have started as a nice idea, in the sense that, I think as progress comes and we have more freedom to
Mm.
choose our partners, our careers, what we do for life, we should not be forced to exist in alienated manner and to suppress aspects of our identity or freedom. So
Mm.
that's fine. But then, like any idea, when it becomes very popular mainstream and gets diluted and watered down to the point, like, we get to like the self-help movement in the West
Yeah.
Coast of America, that mantras such as, don't worry about what people think of you. If you think you're great, you are. And, just follow your values no matter what and bring your whole self to work,
Mm.
actually start to morph into a very narcissistic and entitled
Yeah.
philosophy. And so that's, that was bothering me for a while. So I decided to do kind of a rant or a book that is an antidote, a rational antidote to that. By the way, whenever people think I pick controversial ideas, like I pick ideas where the commonsensical view has become controversial because the mainstream view is so ludicrous that somebody has to say it. But then more recently with the rise of AI, authenticity also has this dimension. Like we're already living at an age where we don't know if something is an authentic human creation or not. I don't know if this is you or your deep fake. I think I know, and vice versa. Our listeners might be humans, or they might be using Otta or something to, kind of transcribe this, have it summarized by Perplexity or ChatGPT, and then it's almost like if there was Neuralink or a pill we could swallow. We could ingest knowledge and expertise, but what's the point of doing that if everything is outsourced? So, but I do think that this notion now with AI being able to replicate everything, what's authentic, what's genuine, it's almost an illusion. And so that's kind of the final part of that book, which brings every book, brings to it or contains fragments of the last one, and also predicts what the next one is going to be, which is going to be on curiosity, human curiosity.
Oh, you've got to interview me for that one.
Exactly. We have time. We have time. Or maybe we do just 2 for the price of 1 now, and then if the world ceases to exist, you have it. You can release it.
That sounds good. So I read a really brilliant article that you wrote with Katrina Berg from Spotify, sort of head of HR, and I cited it actually in a recent talk for Wobie in a masterclass on AI agency and the future of work. And one of the things that really caught my imagination about this article that you guys wrote was when you were saying how if people rely too heavily on using AI to outsource their cognitive functioning, whether it's creative writing, quote unquote creative writing, or whatever it might be, then we risk becoming increasingly automatable and therefore less distinctive and less valuable. And I mean, there's all sorts of substructures that we could dig into on that. But that's a really interesting one because distinctiveness and authenticity are not the same thing, but they are connected. What's your thinking around that interplay?
So first on the actual effect, which I think is a paradox, right? Is sort of like the more you use AI, the more productive you are, but also the more vulnerable you are to automation. So, I mean, we've seen it with smartphones before. The more you rely on Wi-Fi and your smartphone, the smarter you are in a way, because you know where to find an address, a restaurant, and a boyfriend or girlfriend or a dog, whatever. But then also, the more you depend on it, the more stupid you are once you don't have it anymore, right? So that's the kind of principle. So in a way, efficiency can be a trap because you rely on this technology to do things faster, and then realize that if it can be outsourced to AI, then you're not adding value. Anybody can do it. The prompts are not even unique either. As to the distinctiveness part, I think there is still potential to make the interaction that you have with AI distinctive, right? Not just the prompts, but also the editing and then adding or peppering things that are you, which are not different from, like, I imagine a musician creating amazing creative music with electronic instruments, using synthesizers or computers. They're still adding something. And yet the authenticity of that might, I think, not be taken for granted. Because as soon as it exists, a machine can replicate it, and then you cannot, for me, it's like diamonds, right? Like right now, nobody can tell, even with the best equipment, whether a synthetic diamond is different from the real diamond. And yet one is worth 100 times more than the other. I think human output is now indistinguishable from synthetic output done by AI. And maybe we'll only value the human output more out of snobbery or snobism, because we think it's done by a human. Oh, it's like, so it's as if like farm to table and a microwave meal taste the same and are the same, but you're like, oh, Natalie cooked this for me. Oh, wow, it's amazing, right? It's like so much love went into it. So, but for sure, if the value of something depends just on imaginary add-ons, then you got to feel vulnerable about what you're creating, right? I mean, it doesn't have, and I think, it's probably not the first time in history that that's happening. It happens with everything. And I'm sure that you're the artist, not I, but when people started to kind of, when photography was invented and people were shocked that you could take a picture of something as opposed to go and have a representative, like, kind of art of that. And then the same with digital kind of technology. But now it applies to thought, to creativity, to ideas, even the fact that AI has the capacity to surprise us more than humans and create stuff that you don't know where it comes from. And although it's technically not original because it's recombining words that exist out there and bits and pieces, actually, that's how human creativity works as well. Nothing is truly original in the human domain of ideas either, right? It's all footnotes to Plato or another mousetrap.
But so I agree to that to an extent, but I'm going to push back on you on that one because there's something fascinating about, and this has long been a question that keeps bugging me, which is if we're talking about using generative AI, large language models that use abstractions of the world, which are linguistic, so that's kind of that which can be codified in language to then make probabilistic decisions on what the most likely next word will be. That kind of reconfiguration, I could imagine, looks quite different to the kind of thought prompting that we have between one thought in the mind and another. So we know, for instance, you probably know this better than I do, but like if you've got someone who's having a positive set of thoughts, it's more likely to recall other positive thoughts. And if you're on a downward spiral, the opposite applies. But the thing that really interests me is, given that humans live in a temporal, cultural, and somatic context, so we're finite, we're going to die. We live in bodies that are ecosystems interacting with a physical world. And also cultural contexts exist in such a way that many of the trends are not yet quantifiable, like the weaker signals, but still they impact us. All of that information, much of which is not quantified and nonverbal, is stuff that we're constantly at some level absorbing and interpreting and making decisions on, even at an unconscious level. And I don't know that LLMs have an unconscious necessarily. It's not that they have some mythic imagination or a body from which to input. Like, we can talk about computer vision or robotics and what have you, but they're a fundamentally different category of thing than humans. Yuval Noah Harari talks about alien intelligence as opposed to artificial because it's distinctly other than ours. And so when we're thinking about creativity and coming up with ideas, in some ways we can think of ourselves as biological algorithms. And yes, we source from all of these other entities, beings, philosophers, artists that have existed. But it's a different thing. Like, I think we're more complex in that respect. What do you think?
I am definitely more complex. You as well. But the other people, no, I'm joking.
Thank you for that confirmation.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly what I was waiting for all these years.
No, so
I'm kidding.
On a serious note, I think that I'm not sure that we have the ability to answer this question in an objective and definitive way where everybody agrees, right? I think it's like basically where neuroscience meets metaphysics or philosophy and epistemology. And I think you can find, if you like, poetic, philosophical, and scientific similarities between the way large language models work and the way our brain works, including, by the way, the black box part. Because whether you're creating a sonnet, a painting, an essay, or you have an amazing business idea, it's impossible to reverse engineer that in your brain and say, you might have been impacted by this conversation, by your aunt when she told you something, by it's like impossible to reconfigure or reverse engineer. And then, of course, we know that there are also differences between how an LLM works and how the mind works. I think that's an interesting intellectual study. But what is clear to me is that if you just look at the output, it's very hard to differentiate. Very, very hard to differentiate. And I think that's where I use kind of the diamond metaphor and analogy. I think that was the original kind of idea of the Turing test, right? If machines can produce something that is to an expert human, a trained human, undistinguishable or indistinguishable from human creation, we can call them smart. I think the test has been passed for sure. And then maybe where there is still uniqueness or distinctiveness for humans is in that actually large language models are still very much crowdsourcing the wisdom or intelligence of the collective, right? So they are optimized for an average thing. And so in a way, because creativity is also about originality, in a way, there's an argument that you could actually use large language models to see what the right answer is or the obviously correct way of reconfiguring that. And then it pushes you to do something different or unique. And
Interesting.
therefore, our experiences are also, we still have uniqueness in the experiences. I can now, break this glass or decide to go for a walk and talk to somebody. That's still not captured by AI, and it doesn't it's not ingested in large language models. It doesn't train AI. So that's what I said in the last book, that maybe there's this kind of nostalgic sense that we're living, or romantic sense that we're living secret lives far away from algorithmic surveillance when AI isn't watching. Of course, now we're recording on like 3 devices, so obviously this is not a good example for that, right? But is that uniqueness, right? So I can decide to answer something like my barber did, or like my daughter or son did, and just that's my model maybe, or that's my framework or my parameter. Whereas AI, you have to prompt it to do that, but otherwise it will kind of look for Wikipedia style answers. If it's knowledge, right? If it's creative, it can go into any direction. And that's why maybe we still feel some agency, because we are guiding it. But of course, after everybody prompts in a similar way, it prompts itself. After it can predict what people need, it does it itself. And I think that's where you're getting to kind of a scary territory. But, so long as it's economically feasible and possible, there is room for us to find stuff to do that AI isn't doing, I think. And that's basically, maybe that's what human creativity will be narrowed down to, right? I always use the example, Spotify could automate 100% of its artists maybe, and AI could generate, certainly Ed Sheeran, the most famous and successful one. You would hope he is already AI. Hopefully I'm not offending any of the people. I think he has like 500 billion streams, so I'm sure I am offending somebody, or Taylor Swift, right? So AI could do everything, but I don't think it would kill musical creativity. You would then, if you're a musician, have to work out what to do that AI is not doing. And I think maybe that's where distinctiveness, authenticity, and creativity collide. We have to find new things to do that machines aren't doing, maybe because they can't, maybe because they just don't want to.
So there's something really interesting I read last week. It was a study by Ipsos, and it polled 16 to 21-year-olds in the UK, and 46% of the people they polled said that they wish that they had grown up in an age without the internet. 46%, which is absolutely mad, especially when you consider how, I don't know, like a lot of the conferences I go to, people talk about, these digital and then future AI natives. And actually, I wonder if we're missing something quite significant, which is that the degree to which the pace of change is touted to be fast. And there's another question I want to get to in a bit, is like discerning fact from fiction and hype versus actually what's happening, because there's a huge amount of hype. But there's this sense that this drive or demand to be constantly consuming or creating or performing or engaging in some way, that even our downtime has to be optimized for efficiency. Like, use your downtime to meditate, not just because you want to meditate, just because you want to be, I don't know, the next big think, like whatever it is. It's kind of, everything seems to become this utilitarian quest for self-perfection, which is brutal. And so I wonder, do you think there is also going to be a counter trend with so many people now confronted with a reality that they just don't see a possible future for humanity, and especially younger people?
No, I think younger people, even after they say in masses that they wish they lived in an age without the internet, they probably go to Instagram and share, their frappuccino or whatever, picture of their cat or new sunglasses. So, but I think this kind of raises an interesting question potentially, which is like, you know, like overhyped, underhyped, etc. It's very hard to determine that in real time. You always need for time to pass, and then you can look backwards, right?
Yeah.
Like clearly, there is at least a possibility that this is overhyped in the sense that if you at least compare it, like the internet, to go back to your question, has been amazing, right? Like great. But really, like how much of it has been really revolutionary and boosted productivity or life expectancy or happiness or self-knowledge, whatever. As I'm even saying these things loud, I can think of like more often than not, it's like the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So we're addicted to YouTube and Instagram and ourselves, and we fish for compliments online, and you know, we spend hours and hours, like 20 or 25 years of our lives now on screen time. I'm not saying that going for a walk in the park or meditating or doing yoga is better, but this doesn't seem that I mean, it doesn't make you richer. Most people, you know, income is stagnant vis-a-vis cost of living, even in successful cities. So wealth keeps very accumulated at the top, especially income inequality when it comes to salary. Is wealth inequality, you know, it's like is as high as it was in 1925, not
Oh,
higher, but
wow.
it's like still remains at a very high level. Happiness levels, as we know, Americans 40% medicated, antidepressants, anti-anxiety right now, Ozempic, everything, you know. So like, and then, you know, I think life expectancy is not extended by the internet. And so I think, you know, AI has a lot of work to do. If the main contribution is, let's say, to augment knowledge workers by automating scheduling tasks and emails and sending your digital twin to a meeting, that's actually showing that all that stuff that we are occupied doing has no value.
Yeah.
Right? Is really the mental or intellectual equivalent to people, weavers working manually in factories in cotton, kind of like in the 19th century or whatever, before we automated that. So, you know, so I'm not going to say, wow, this has been amazing, because actually we need to work out what are we going to do instead. And maybe that's not going to provide the new value or new value creation. It just will kill the stuff that actually, you know, maybe it's not adding that much value already.
Yeah, that's quite a stinger of a question. I think because every time I hear one, every time, but the majority of times I hear people proselytizing about the extraordinary boons that AI innovation platforms tools are going to gift to humanity. They're like, well, it'll just create more jobs. I'm thinking, no, it's not going to create that more jobs, because if it can automate everything, it's going to automate the jobs that would be managing the AI. Like that's the whole point of agents, right? It's an autonomous being that can act in order to manage workflows and at certain point. Yeah.
And I would say, you know, still, I mean, it's quite possible if you think about AI advances, accelerating research, finding the cure to, you know, cancer, improving medical diagnosis. For sure, there are a lot of opportunities where it could be amazing. But right now, what we're seeing is lift and shift, saving time, improvements not around accuracy or quality, but more speed, efficiency, and cost. And all of the businesses that were saying, oh, we see an augmentation game, are now saying, oh, actually, maybe we can automate not just tasks, but also jobs. Okay, that's going to, you know, make capitalism more efficient, and, you know, with the good consequence that it has and the bad consequence that it has. But I'm still sitting on the fence, because both things are possible, right? It is still possible that it's oversold and it's like digital revolution on steroids 2.0. And then, some companies and people make a lot of money and we change our lifestyles, but then we regret it. We form part of the 46% or 50% and say, like, oh, you know, I wish it was the other way around. Or it's possible that it really enables us all to work 2 hours a week and watch Netflix and drink caipirinhas in Copacabana.
I mean, that sounds blissful.
Yeah, that sounds good. Exactly.
But
I'll
the thing
sign up
is,
for
like,
that.
no, me too. I'll be there in a flash. But I think the thing is, I mean, there's so many things to unpack here, but one of the things I find quite shocking, especially amidst all of the excitement around new models coming out, I was reading a paper last week that something like 43% error rates, or what people like to call hallucinations, which is a misnomer.
Yeah.
It should be a fabrication, whatever.
Yeah.
43%. If you went to a doctor and you had
Yeah.
a really, like, if you had a what you thought was a burst appendix, or I don't know, testicular cancer, and you go to the doctor and they get it wrong nearly half the time, you wouldn't go to that doctor. You'd be like, my life is worth more than this, right? And yet you've got governments who are bedding these systems into the functioning of their societies, which has political, economic, and civic impact, with these high error rates.
Yes.
Obviously, enterprise systems with proprietary data have lower error rates, from what I can tell from the research. But it's still like the fact that this has just been sold as a panacea. And you mentioned earlier, like cost savings and replacing humans. And if it can get the job done at 70%, as good as a human, but at a fraction of the cost, fuck it, why not? And I think that fuck it, why not attitude is going to bite people in the arse, because you're going to end up with dross. And we're seeing it already, this AI slop in so many different platforms. I think it's gonna cause many more problems than it solves. And I'm particularly worried about it compounding existing systemic inequalities, because whatever it's built upon, the foundations are not leading towards more enriched, dignified lives where people have access to more medication, better education, better shelter, greater stability and peace. Like that does not seem to be the direction in which we're heading in the short term.
Yeah. I like that there was a lot of swearing in that kind of run, because that AI actually doesn't, Gen AI wouldn't swear that much. So maybe we should all
start
there's
swearing.
a lot of genitalia and profanity and testicular and then arse and other things. But
arse intelligence. Love it.
So look, again, and again, I want to, when people are too positive, I try to balance it out with negative. When they are negative, because we are highlighting the downside, I think at the same time, of course, in many areas, medical diagnosis isn't much more reliable than 45% today, right? Yeah. Drivers are definitely incompetent, and 1.3 million people die every year courtesy of human stupidity behind the wheel. As you know, I'm very active in the recruitment and assessment industry. The average interview is shocking, and people get scandalized when there is like a lawsuit because AI was biased. The amount of prejudice, discrimination, conscious bias, not even unconscious, that goes in and behind the closed door of an interview is crazy, it's medieval. So I think there are areas where the room for improvement is high, even if AI isn't perfect. And then there are others where actually, I think in most areas, true human expertise is better than AI, even if it can be augmented with a little bit of AI peppered there, right? Coaching is an interesting one as well, right? I have a lot of colleagues who are human coaches. I do some coaching myself. And, when I say that you could use Gen AI as a complement or as a supplement or as a substitute for a coach, they get really, really angry. But I'm not saying they're as good as the best human coach, but they're for sure better than many human coaches that are charging, 20 or 30 bucks an hour, and they're outsourced and they're repeating the same thing over and over again. Like, it depends what you measure. Point. Exactly. And I think, it's the same with food. If you have the means and you have taste, or you're snobby, or say, I would never go into like fast food place or buy this or a microwave meal. Okay, good for you. But even in that area, there's innovation where technology has improved the quality and the health kind of, So I think what's industrialized at scale to some degree is the point is not supreme quality, but it can still improve over human ineptitude, or, like basically humans who are still making a living despite the fact that they're crooks. And let's not go into consulting, because, would you hire an average consultant to tell you what to do in any area of business, or just ask Gen AI?
Yeah, that's a good point.
One is free and actually, knowledge based, and the other is expensive. And I'm not sure what even their level of expertise or training is.
So I think this is a tricky thing, because it's not just then about work that can be replicated being valueless work, and we shouldn't have been spending time on it anyway, and it'll free us up. But then there's also huge swathes of the population whose work will be automatable at a higher level of competence by AI, which is itself flawed. So then what happens? Because what I'm worried about is you end up in this very sort of tiered system where people praise those who are able to adapt and to manage or synthesize and perhaps a bit more polymathic, which is one of the things that you're hearing about, like synthesizing across different domains, because so far, AI tools tend to be quite domain specific. The ones that are the best ones, like you were mentioning medicine or, for instance, cars and stuff. But so what happens to the vast swathe of people when they can just be replaced by agents?
So I think that's, that there needs to be an economic, social, and a political model for that, assuming that could happen, right? And I think, the speculation is that if that truly happened and there were 3 companies that produce the agents, autonomous AI agents with artificial general intelligence that can do everything, right? Most of us will be idle, and probably there will be kind of some guaranteed universal income to avoid or prevent a revolution and civil war, right? That's basically the model. And by the way, Harari in Homo Deus, which I think is 10 years old this year, said in the future, the world will be run by a super powerful elite who will have access to a super powerful computer, and only they will have access to that computer, and the rest of us will be irrelevant. Actually, that's the apocalyptic scenario, right? Again, I think we should entertain the idea that might not happen, and actually at the other extreme is like, oh, okay, I'm automating auto-completion in my emails, and my PowerPoint presentation now takes 2 minutes, not 2 days. And like, it could be quite trivial, or it could be quite existential. In the middle, in the kind of futuristic but positive scenario, we're healthier, happier, more productive. I think that's from OK Computer. Fitter, happier, more productive, which is also kind of a prophetic. So those things also can happen. What worries me before you get to that scenario is the fact that already today, knowledge workers who remember are hired for their skills, for their education, for their expertise, for their ability to think, fundamentally for their ability to think. That includes you and I and all of our listeners. For the first time, have the privilege or the ability to not think very much and to not use their brains. So if you look at the kind of, in behavioral economics, the Tversky and Kahneman, system 1 and system 2 thinking, they won the Nobel Prize by showing with many experiments that although humans are perfectly capable of rationality and logical reasoning and acting, most of the times we're kind of lazy and we choose not to think. Why? Because the brain is not for thinking, it's for economizing energy. It's very high caloric consuming, it's disproportionately large. So not using it is very efficient. And therefore, we're much better off jumping to conclusions, using our intuition, feelings about facts rather than the facts. And actually, that's where heuristics come. If we don't utilize that, we couldn't exist. If every time I see you, I have to say, oh, tabula rasa approach. I don't know if Natalie is still my friend, or maybe she wants to poison me. She just bought me a, who knows? Then, you can't leave your home or even have a home, etc. But so they said, maybe 80% of the times, system 1 is predominant, and that's thinking without thinking. But then thanks to our system 2, which is our smart, analytical, logical, the scientist, that system is so impressive that actually it managed to create AI. It managed to create an intelligent machine. We're so smart maybe not you and I, but the people who invented this, right? that they invent. I mean, we could have if we wanted, but we have
I
better
don't know
things to do,
about
of course. Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Anyway, but as a species, at least, let's take credit for the fact that we are so smart that we even managed to invent a machine that does the thinking for us. So, if most of the times we try not to think and we rely on heuristics, and we basically thinking without thinking, which is system one, intuitive, heuristic, prejudice, bias, blah blah blah, and the little bit of time that we spend actually thinking and using our brain and being analytical, now we are outsourcing to a machine. We can exist and be without thinking at all. So Descartes' famous "I think, therefore I am." Now it's like, I don't think, therefore I am, or I don't think and I still am, or what are we, right? So that's the kind of thing that is a fundamental assault on our preconceptions of what it means to be human. And I think questions our essence, right? Because even knowledge workers today are not thinking that much. And before AI came, I think most of us found ways to do our job not thinking that much, because you rely on experience and you say that. So, what does it mean to be human when even intelligent humans can go about their typical day not thinking at all? I mean, we can feel still, but that's just one part. And thinking is sort of like taken out of the equation. And maybe I thought, like, to find an analogy, just like our ancestors, hunter-gatherers, fishermen, they, like this community, they didn't need Ozempic, or they didn't need to worry about keto diets and 5 a day, or
Pilates
cutting
or...
down carbs. Exactly, because they were active all the time and they had to maximize caloric consumption. Maybe we need to think of the intellectual equivalent of Pilates, which is, I know you're going on a digital detox, etc., but maybe we should go on like a thinking retreat, where just like people today do digital detox and they don't use Wi-Fi or social media for a while to reconnect. Maybe there'll be like ChatGPT detox times, like where we don't use Gen AI to think. Even before Gen AI arrived, we were like already, like when you're in the pub or in a bar and you can't have a conversation with somebody without taking out your phone because who was in this movie or what happened. It's like this tendency that we have to not be augmented, but we're dependent of this, like we're crippled without our phone and Wi-Fi. We could be crippled without Gen AI. And therefore, if we don't use our thinking muscles at all, what does the future? I mean, that's the bit that worries me a bit, because already a lot of the problems that humanity has are self-inflicting for not being too rational and not thinking.
Yeah.
So imagine if the majority of smart people stop thinking altogether.
So there's some interesting things. I know I've definitely seen some interesting studies coming out of MIT's Media Lab, but other places too, about this kind of hobbling of cognition, discernment, critical thinking, creative ideation, attention, and then just sort of the basic general overwhelm that we get from too much information from too many screens. So there's definitely a set of conditions that are not conducive to doing deep work, because we're so fragmented in our thinking, and there's such a drain on our attention, and there's such a dopaminergic drip the whole time of all these different things that are clamoring for our attention. But at the same time, here in Barcelona, for instance, there is a booming club called the Offline Club. People seeking out spaces where they don't have to be caught up in this relentless stream of information. And I think there's something else as well, several things. One, I was listening to an interview, recent one, with Yuval Noah Harari, who was talking about doing an information detox or an information fast, and it was a really long period of time. I think it was up to 60 days or something, completely offline, with no books, no music, literally no stimulation, not even hyperstimulus of the internet. And to be able to actually come to contact with one's own, he talked about anger specifically, but I think what philosophers have done for eons is to come to know yourself, know thyself. And I wonder if there is something more that we potentially will lose, like this sense of sovereignty, if on the one hand, you've got all this AI slop and all this information and it's all homogenous and a bit shit. But on the other hand, hyper-personalized services, media from algorithms know exactly what you want, or the smart fridge that can order exactly what you need, or here's the perfect AI companion. I know exactly how much resistance you want when you're going to have an argument, and just to hit that sweet spot, whatever it is. And I worry that starts to then eat away at what makes us human. It's not just about our capacity for thinking, and people who are high in need for cognition will, really devour the books and do the research and have the conversations, or seek out these offline spaces. But more than that, what it means when AI becomes so enmeshed in our intimate spaces, synthetic relationships, or attachments to chatbots. And we're already seeing these crazy headlines of people becoming deluded because Llama or Gemini or fucking DeepSeek said, "Oh yes, you're so I saw one of these. Someone showed this to me the other day with a straight face, and I was like, "This is a whole new order of problem."
Yeah, and so, but I think that still falls
You're getting a
into
lot
the
of rants from me
category.
today. Sorry,
No,
Tomas.
yeah. No, I like it. I like it. And as you know, I'm mostly in agreement, but I think that still falls into kind of the intellectual or psychological version of Pilates, right? Because that's oh, you go to a hipster cafe in Williamsburg or Shoreditch, and the tables say after 5 o'clock, this is a no laptop table. And it's like, okay, for the elite, for the people who are the creative workforce, and or people like Harari, or people like us, you can do that, but that's like saying, again, I avoid fast food and I'm only doing slow food and farm to table, etc. It's like, great, you can afford, even if a lot of your time is still, you're doing it because you know that a lot of your time you are still trapped or within this kind of a digital AI matrix, whatever. But what happens to the majority of people who can't do that, and they have to rely on that, and they have to use it, and they have to abuse it to get a job, to get by, etc. So I think that's where it's a little bit, there's a bit of inequity, and it's a bit punitive on the majority of people, right? And again, I'm not saying maybe the average working class person of the future is still better off than a medieval peasant or a factory worker in the 19th century, or now in an assembly line, right? Maybe things improve for them, which from our perspective, or from where we are sitting, snobbishly seems difficult to acknowledge, but we have to acknowledge it as well, right? That's like saying, I mean, the main part of progress that is visible or has been documented, and I think is objectively true within capitalism in the last 100 years or so, is lifting people out of poverty in the poorest places in the world. And on the other hand, there are diminishing returns for places that were already quite industrialized, and you have all these existential or spiritual kind of diseases or issues that you have to deal with, right? And maybe we should just acknowledge that AI or technology or capitalism doesn't care about that, not least because there will be an AI solution to your anxieties and neurosis, which is the AI Freud or whatever, right? I'm sure that exists. If not, somebody should go now and register that domain on GoDaddy or whatever.
So let me ask you then.
I'm sure it's taken.
Freud.ai. We should go on it now and just check, actually.
Yeah.
So where do you and I completely take your point, and it is quite a bleak picture thinking about the level of automation that's going to happen across most people's roles and industries. Where do you think you're going to be in 5 years' time? For people like us who do knowledge work, synthesizing information, research. I mean, you're an academic researcher, you teach on this, you consult on this. I'm more in the realm of, I suppose, keynote speaking and that side of things, and moving more into the offline gathering space, which is much more appealing and can't be replicable by AI just yet, as long as people can pay for it. Where do you think we're headed in 5 years' time? What's going to happen to our roles?
you know, I honestly don't know. I I have to say, intuitively, I'm operating under the naive delusion that we'll be doing the same. But something tells me maybe I should question that.
Mm.
And I think even if we are doing the same, we might be doing it differently and bits of our time and our day, since we're probably both still want to work and or need to work, or a
Mm.
combination of both, or one or the other. Um, you hope that we still have the privilege of doing what we enjoy, and that doesn't actually feel that much like work. And but I think that it's very hard to know, because 5 years, if you told me like next year, I think, yeah, same. In 2 years, yeah, probably, but five seems
Yeah.
like it could change a big deal. And I think that in the last book, I Human, I talk a lot about the rediscovering of the analog world, which I
Mm.
think is very compatible with your story of the offline cafe in Barcelona and all
Mm.
of that. So I like to think that maybe will be one positive consequence of this is that we'll be spending more time in the analog world, in the 3D world, or at least if work is less enjoyable because we're at mercy of AI, need to interact, we need to spend more of our time, or still much of our time, training AI to be better so that we can become irrelevant, which is what's happening largely today. Then at least that the time we are supposed to be enjoying life, we we kind of rediscover this uh, analog way of being, and
Mm.
or at least we make that time as enjoyable and meaningful as possible. So I guess the short answer is I hope less screen time.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Which seems ironic, but I think maybe at some point, because now, like, there's a point where screen time becomes just AI,
Yeah.
and like everything, even like you can, like most people can see my talks and my lectures and everything I said, including this, on YouTube,
Mm.
and we're a little step away from AI creating that, and maybe you and I can monetize that in some way, but then that only makes sense if we can then revalue the experience of being somewhere, because we have to be somewhere, right? Even if our deepfakes are everywhere, and if a lot of time is spent on screen time that is recorded and datafied and analyzed and translated into insights or whatever, we still have to be somewhere. That goes back to your
Mm.
embodiment or body or whatever thing. And so, like,
Mm.
that part of being is maybe uh, the bit that will matter. And the rest, I honestly think, Natalie, it might be like, I was having lunch with somebody 2 days ago, and that was a nice lunch experience, human to human, right? Like lunch. But we're talking about, she's a professor, and we're talking about these things. And she told me, like, this guy, he's written a best-selling book on like AI, and it was just done by AI. And she said it, and it's like, on the one hand, that's kind of impressive. On the other hand, what value does that have? I mean,
Yeah.
he's using his social proof and his expertise and his brand to publish it and sell it, which is great. But then on the other side, who will read it? People will ask Gen AI to summarize it, and then as like AI writing for AI, AI
Yeah.
hiring AI, AI teaching AI, and AI, like, fine, where is our place is the
Yeah.
question. And I think on the one hand, that's exciting because we need to answer that and find that. On the other hand, it's also worrying if the answer is there is none.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something that runs through that line, which is if we're using AI to become more effective, more productive, and then there's a whole secondary market, which is basically AI is talking to AI, is consuming AI generated content,
Yeah.
and that becomes the bulk of what the internet is, and the training that these large language models that use public
Yeah.
information and obviously also copyrighted information, like when it starts to go down that route, I think there's a really interesting question around I guess, so the value piece, how do we value humans if up
Yeah.
until now we've been valued at GDP or for our utilitarian capacity of being able to perform an economic function? And it's not that that's always been the case. It's been a small snapshot of history. And the question I'm curious about is like, how can we use this moment to look at the ways in which capitalism has worked and then
Yeah.
create something different where capitalism has just really just come to its limits. You can't grow beyond finite boundaries, and I worry
Yeah.
that with AI, the amount of resource that it requires to cool data centers, to
Yeah.
draw energy from the grid to the point where nuclear stations are now being reopened up when actually we need to be doing green transitions. And it's like,
Yes.
just to create this nonsense AI speaking to AI layer to our reality that I don't think we need. I would much rather see a future where you have specific domain specific AI in the field of, let's say, medicine, which is honing its capabilities to solving real challenges, rather than let's just mess about and create this AI ad and people are going to hate it because it's uncanny and doesn't have any soul. Like, or an
Yeah.
article on LinkedIn that no one's going to read because it's AI generated and you can see because
Yes.
it's like everything. It sounds like everything. Or the other thing, like creating CVs, and when people write up their personal experience, it all reads the same because
Yeah.
they got AI to write it. Like,
Yes.
there's just such a
Yeah.
flattening, and
It
it's
seems that way.
expensive
Yeah. It
for
seems that
now.
way. Yeah, it seems that way. It seems like we are kind of like the digital version of Marxist assembly line workers, right?
Hmm.
AI is the factory, and we
Yeah,
are the producing
the
content,
minions.
and yeah, exactly. But there's also the opportunity, right? Which is, like even simple things as like AI writing a LinkedIn post that nobody except AI reads. And so, I mean, in a way, the good thing of that is that it's just commoditizing and destroying the value of something that, let's face it, should not really have that much value, right? So I think if you think about innovation as creative destruction, the destruction part here is clear
Yeah,
of what's destroyed. But I don't think that a lot of the things that are destroyed or are being destroyed are actually that precious. Even I think,
hmm.
there is like a little bit of a narcissistic wound or a self-perceived, injury to our egos
Yeah,
when we think of like AI doing creative stuff and writing, because let's face it, actually, it seems like we're more predictable than we thought, even when
yeah,
we're doing creative things. And I can tell you, when I answer emails to different people about the same topic for the last 10, 15 years, I do think like, where is my
yeah,
LLM to do this?
yeah.
Because really, and I don't want to waste time so I think, on the one hand, it's very impressive that we created this superior synthetic or artificial intelligence that then creating. On the other hand, it also means that that stuff, it might not be that impressive, right?
Hmm.
It might not be that impressive. Again, I mean, there's a difference between recreating Bach or
Hmm.
Michelangelo or whatever, and actually being those people who do it for the first
Totally.
time.
Yeah.
And I think in many areas, even if you think now about, I don't know, Netflix using AI instead of humans, like Hollywood studios, and then music and writings, novel, etc. Like, we have to wait and see. There's a difference between like an AI version of Harry Potter and the next J.K. Rowling or whoever you
Yeah.
want, right? Actually doing something totally unique for the first time.
Yeah. Totally.
And maybe it will come, but so far I think we haven't seen that. It's more like, wow, it's indistinguishable from what has been done before, which again
Yeah.
is impressive, right? I think even like in ancient Chinese culture, there was always more status attributed to somebody who could create a fake replica of something
Mm.
without other people realizing. And DeepSeek is the same, right? It's like, who cares about inventing ChatGPT or OpenAI if it requires this much money, and then like if you can do with like a little bit of money something that looks the same, wow, that's the person that deserves the credit, right? So I
Mm.
think there is an element of skill and mastery and craftsmanship in people who can copy something for cheaper, but I'm interested more in like what's going to be new, what's going to be truly creative, and what's going to be ingenious and not based on stuff that exists already or that is a copy paste of what is there. And I think, as you said, from LinkedIn posts to, some news articles, some essays, some books, you go like some PowerPoint presentations, you go like, I hope this was done by AI.
Yeah, that's brutal.
But sadly, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I have friends who are in like film and TV production, and they will tell me like 3 years ago, we have an expression when somebody brings us a script or something that is, it's very ChatGPT, right? Okay,
Oh,
let's face
no.
it has advanced a lot since then, but sometimes that is the sense because yeah, it's correct. It's like the humor that Gen AI has, right? It's always like, nah, yeah, but you don't go like, my God,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah. Probably because it can't swear, which I didn't know, but now I
Yeah,
do.
exactly. We should swear more. That's
We
the
should
only
swear.
conclusion and takeaway message for our audience who is practical and wants to improve themselves and optimize and become augmented. Swear more.
Swear more. I did see
Yeah.
yesterday actually it was a few days ago on Instagram. It was this guy who'd basically written a post for LinkedIn and was just putting in nonsense bits of sentence within the rest of his post. And he's like, this is how people will tell that I'm actually a real
Yes,
human, just putting in random nonsense. And there
I
was a
know.
really interesting creative angle to it.
I know, and well, two trivia but interesting kind of things that come to mind. One is that they did this already, like the main science publishers, and actually the main software that is used to spot plagiarism and copywriting in shibboleth, I think it's called, in universities and schools, did an analysis of all the papers that have been published since OpenAI launched ChatGPT,
Oh, no.
and they found the key terms that are typically coming out in ChatGPT and other AI, like
Delve.
certainly,
Yeah.
or on the one hand, that, it's like, and there's been an increase of like 20% since, so like significant non-trivial increase, which they estimate like at least in this number of papers, it's been used. And then they even reported the ones that they forgot to delete. Would you like me to add anything?
Yes, yeah.
It's like that part there. So that's one. And then the other one is like there's this brilliant book that I always recommend called The Most Human Human by Brian Christian, who, like you, is a self-taught polymath. And basically, about, I think, 8 years ago or so, he enrolled in the Turing tests of the time around the UK, the famous ones, and he enrolled as a human confederate. So, this was early chatbots
Yeah.
that in a blind tasting, like a wine blind tasting, the chatbots were trying to pretend they were humans to human experts, all computer professors, etc. And of course, if you only have chatbots, it's easy to say. So it has to be a human confederate that is pretending. And his role, his personal goal was to be unanimously spotted or identified as a human, which even back then he said, like, if I do typos, it's not enough because already their chatbots would do typos to pretend they're
Yeah.
humans. Right? So there's it's an incredible analysis of the importance of surprise and the unexpected, and how basically this serves as a metaphor for today. Maybe already today, but certainly in the future, we will have to do really awkward and artificial things, including stupid things, including swearing, so that other people feel that we are human. In other words, we have to like go to great lengths to demonstrate our humanity. In a way, not similar to the cybersecurity test where you have to say, prove that you are not a robot, and you have to identify how many traffic lights there are or how many wheels there are. I have failed that test of humanity many times. So I'm beginning to question whether I am indeed human or not.
Well, we've got so many more things that we could discuss, but we're coming close to time. So,
Yeah. And also then our listeners would fall asleep. So I think we better stop.
Maybe this is just interesting to you and me and everyone else as an agent.
Exactly. Yes. Hopefully their agents will summarize this and then,
Make it sound
something
good.
will come up. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So given the amount that you have to digest to write your books, to do your talks, to advise, to coach, I imagine, and if not, then tell me your secret. I imagine there are days where it's quite overwhelming and a bit bleak. So my question to you is, with all of the uncertainty that we're facing, how do you keep yourself grounded and clear-minded or
Yeah.
clear-hearted, depending on which way you want to take it?
I don't.
You just keep going
That's the
with the
answer.
onslaught.
I don't, and I think, I question myself and what I do too often, more often than than I would like. And I mean, you just try to vary it a bit, and sometimes, you pause and you go for a walk, or read something. I think you do something irrelevant. I think, you kind of, there's a sense, especially around productivity, that you keep doing what you like and what you think you're good at, or what other people think you're good at. But that's like intertwined with a lot of existential angst and fear and questions. And on the only good part about really being a bit neurotic in that sense is that you realize that you shouldn't actually take yourself that seriously either. So maybe just, and I'm not very good at kind of mindfulness meditation or to stop. So I keep going, but in a way, it is what it is, it is what it is. And then there are sufficient distractions in my life, including stuff that maybe doesn't make that much sense, certainly in terms of optimizing myself and my career, that actually I enjoy doing. And, it might be kicking a ball or cooking, or I often find myself even enjoying reading ridiculous comments by maybe humans, maybe AI, on ridiculous topics. And I don't know what else there is to do, to be honest. If you tell me, if you know, tell me. If you know, tell me.
Well, do things, I think, that bring you meaning and joy.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think, exactly. Or like, I think the degree to which you need to find things really meaningful or purposeful should be decreased in general. And, not don't overdo the meaning stuff, because actually that also leads to conspiracy theories and cult-like mentalities.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
so I'm kind of like agnostic in that sense. I know the mind has the capacity to ask questions that we cannot answer. So at some point, just stop asking the questions and
You're just unhooked from that whole
yeah,
train.
go out for a swim. Or
Well, that sounds gorgeous.
maybe for a beer, because a swim is still very alpha and like sort of like very career minded. Yeah, go out for a beer or two.
Or for a beer on a lake in a boat.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah. Or go out for a fucking beer,
Go out for
which
a
is the
fucking beer.
proper conclusion in the headline. That's it.
I will go out for a fucking beer after this.
Only people who listen to the whole thing will understand the conclusion.
Tomas, I always love speaking with you. Thank you so much. Tell us the title of your book and where people can find it and what date it comes out, if you would.
Yes. So, apparently pre-sales are very important, pre-orders.
Yeah.
So they can find it now already on Amazon. And it's called Don't Be Yourself, Why Authenticity is Overrated and What to Do Instead. Excellent. And it's going to blow your mind away and change your life forever. You'll be happier, fitter, and more productive.
That is a big promise, Tomas.
Yeah, exactly. But you won't be yourself, You actually, the book starts, and this might be a nice way to finish. It starts with a quote from Jarvis Cocker that says, "You will always be stuck with you no matter what, wherever you go and whatever you do."
Well, at least make the ride a fun one in that case.
Yes, exactly. And she wanted to be like common people. By the way, she is the wife of Varoufakis.
No way.
The woman.
That's who I was talking about.
Yeah,
yes,
she went to St. Martin's. Yeah, she went to St. Martin's College. Look it up. Yeah, ask ChatGPT.
Wow, I've been reading about him and all the sort of ideas around techno-feudalism. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so read the book. Thank you very much. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, enjoy your beer when you get it.
I will. And let's do this again. And I look forward to the exhibition in London. So send us the invite.
Yeah.
Yes,
right,
there you go. Okay. See you, Natalie.
Cheers.